Paul Hogan became one of the most recognizable faces in the world by playing a man who looked completely comfortable in the wilderness. With a hat, a grin, and a famous knife joke, he turned Crocodile Dundee into a global phenomenon and transformed himself from a working-class Australian into an international celebrity. But behind the laughter, fame, and enormous success was a far more complicated personal story. One built around sacrifice, broken relationships, regret, and two women who shaped his life in completely different ways. For decades, audiences saw Paul Hogan as relaxed, funny, and naturally confident. Yet the private reality behind that image often looked very different. The deeper story of his life was not only about movies or money. It was about what success cost him, what fame changed inside him, and whether he fully understood the people who loved him until it was too late. Long before Hollywood arrived, Paul Hogan was simply a young man from Parramatta in Western Sydney trying to make a living. He was born on October 8, 1939, in New South Wales, Australia. In later years, he sometimes joked about his background and claimed to be from more remote places because it sounded more adventurous. But his real beginnings were ordinary and modest. He attended school in Parramatta but was never especially interested in academics. He left school young and entered the workforce like many working-class Australian men of his generation. One of his earliest jobs was working as a rigger on the Sydney Harbour Bridge, physically demanding labor that shaped his practical, straightforward personality. He also worked as a lifeguard at a swimming pool in Granville. That job turned out to be one of the most important moments of his life, because it was there that he met a young woman named Nolene Edwards. She was 18 years old. Paul was 19. Their relationship did not begin with dramatic romance or complicated courtship. According to Paul himself, it was simple. He liked her. She liked him. They got married. In June 1958, the two teenagers married and immediately began building a life together. Their first child arrived before Paul turned 20, and within a few years they had 3 sons. Eventually, the family grew even larger. Life during those years was difficult financially. Paul worked hard to support the household while Nolene managed the family and raised the children. There was no glamour, no celebrity, and no sign that Paul Hogan would one day become famous across the world. In many ways, those early years formed the foundation of everything that came later. Nolene stood beside him before success arrived, before money changed their circumstances, and before the pressures of fame complicated their lives. Then, during the early 1970s, something unexpected happened. Paul Hogan appeared on an Australian television talent show called New Faces. But he did not arrive as a traditional performer. Instead, he appeared almost like a rebellious audience member, determined to challenge the judges and mock the format of the program itself. Wearing work clothes and behaving with rough humor and confidence, he immediately connected with audiences. His comedy felt natural and authentic because he sounded like an ordinary Australian man rather than a polished entertainer. Television producers quickly realized viewers loved him. That appearance launched his entertainment career and eventually led to The Paul Hogan Show, which became hugely popular in Australia and internationally. Paul Hogan's appeal came from his ability to make audiences feel comfortable. He represented a kind of relaxed masculinity that felt approachable rather than glamorous. He joked easily, spoke casually, and acted unimpressed by celebrity culture itself. But success changed the structure of his personal life. As his career grew, he traveled more frequently, spent increasing amounts of time away from home, and entered a world far removed from the ordinary family life he had once known. Meanwhile, Nolene remained home raising children and managing the realities of everyday life. Like many spouses of rising celebrities, she experienced fame differently than the public imagined. For the audience, success looks exciting. For families, it often means distance, loneliness, and emotional strain. After more than 2 decades of marriage, Paul and Nolene divorced in 1981. Yet the story did not end there. Less than a year later, they remarried. The decision suggested that despite their problems, neither was fully prepared to let go of the life they had built together. For a moment, it seemed possible they might survive the pressures that fame had created. But then another turning point arrived. In 1985, Paul began filming a movie set in the Australian outback. The project was Crocodile Dundee, the role that would define his career forever. During production, he met actress Linda Kozlowski. Linda came from a very different background than Paul. Born in Connecticut, she trained seriously as an actress at Juilliard and worked in theater before arriving in Hollywood. Unlike Paul, whose career developed accidentally through personality and comedy, Linda approached acting as a craft she had studied and worked hard to master. Before Crocodile Dundee, she had little fame and only a few screen credits. But those who worked with her immediately recognized talent, intelligence, and determination. Filming in remote Australian locations created intense conditions for the cast and crew. The environment was physically difficult and sometimes dangerous. According to stories from the production, Linda handled the harsh conditions without complaint, impressing everyone around her. As filming continued, a connection developed between Paul and Linda. People working on the movie noticed the chemistry between them growing stronger. According to those close to the production, the relationship became impossible to ignore. For Paul Hogan, the situation was deeply complicated. He was married, had children, and already carried decades of shared history with Nolene. Yet his connection with Linda changed the direction of his personal life completely. When Crocodile Dundee premiered in 1986, it became one of the most successful comedy films ever made. Audiences around the world loved Paul Hogan's charm and humor. The movie earned hundreds of millions of dollars and transformed him into an international superstar almost overnight. Linda Kozlowski also became famous immediately. Her performance earned major attention, and she became closely associated with Paul both on and off screen. But the success of the movie came alongside the collapse of Paul's second marriage to Nolene. This time, the divorce became public and painful. Media coverage intensified because the story involved fame, infidelity rumors, and one of Australia's most beloved celebrities. For Nolene, the experience was deeply humiliating. She had spent decades supporting Paul through struggle and uncertainty only to watch the marriage collapse after he became internationally famous. Still, she handled the situation with remarkable dignity. One of the most memorable things she reportedly said afterward was simple but powerful. She had the best years of his life. The statement carried sadness but also clarity. She understood exactly what she had contributed to Paul's success and exactly what had been lost. After the divorce, Paul and Nolene reportedly went many years without speaking to each other. Meanwhile, Paul moved forward publicly with Linda Kozlowski. The two married in 1990. At the time, much of the public viewed the relationship romantically. To audiences, they looked like the perfect Hollywood couple. Attractive, successful, adventurous, and deeply connected. Paul openly praised Linda in interviews, often speaking about her beauty and intelligence with genuine admiration. They continued making films together, including Crocodile Dundee 2. However, the enormous success of the original movie proved difficult to repeat. Hollywood increasingly wanted Paul Hogan to remain permanently connected to the Crocodile Dundee image. Audiences loved the character so much that escaping it became almost impossible. Linda experienced a different frustration. Although Crocodile Dundee made her famous, many of the acting opportunities offered afterward reduced her to stereotypical supporting roles. She later admitted that she turned down projects she considered shallow or creatively empty. Over time, she became increasingly dissatisfied with Hollywood and the direction of her career. Eventually, Linda stepped away from acting almost entirely. Their son, Chance Hogan, was born in 1998, and for a while family life seemed enough. Linda focused on motherhood while Paul continued carrying the identity audiences expected from him. But underneath the surface, problems slowly developed. Friends later suggested that Linda increasingly felt trapped by the role of being Paul Hogan's wife. Her own ambitions and identity became smaller, while Paul's celebrity remained dominant. Marriage can become difficult when one person's life slowly disappears inside another person's fame. In 2013, Linda filed for divorce, officially ending their marriage after more than 20 years together. Although public statements described the separation as friendly, the emotional reality appeared far more complicated. Linda later explained that she wanted to rediscover herself and live independently again. She eventually moved away from Los Angeles and later remarried after meeting a man during travels in Morocco. Paul reportedly struggled emotionally with the separation more than he admitted publicly. Those close to him claimed he felt increasingly lonely after Linda moved on with her life. Despite the divorce, she reportedly continued worrying about his health and well-being from a distance. That lingering concern suggested that even after their relationship ended, genuine care still existed between them. As Paul entered his later years, other difficulties emerged. Australian authorities launched lengthy investigations regarding tax issues connected to offshore financial arrangements. The legal battles dragged on for years and created enormous stress. At one point, Paul was even temporarily prevented from leaving Australia while authorities attempted to resolve the financial dispute. Although settlements were eventually reached and the situation concluded, the experience damaged his public image and added pressure during an already difficult stage of life. Meanwhile, aging brought physical struggles as well. The energetic outdoorsman audiences remembered from Crocodile Dundee gradually became an older man dealing with pain, reduced mobility, and declining health. Public appearances became less frequent. The contrast between the rugged screen image and the aging reality became impossible to ignore. In interviews during his later years, Paul occasionally hinted at deeper regrets beneath his humor. At times, he admitted that despite all the fame and money, something important still felt missing from his life. That statement carried enormous emotional weight because Paul Hogan had achieved nearly every form of external success imaginable. He became wealthy, internationally famous, admired, and culturally iconic. Yet success does not guarantee peace. One of the most emotional moments of his later years came when he reunited publicly with Linda Kozlowski in 2024 for a restored anniversary release connected to Crocodile Dundee. Standing beside each other again decades after the movie changed both their lives, they watched footage of themselves as younger people, energetic, attractive, and full of